So Barry, as we dive in, it seems like a lot of the folks today on the call know you, but just in case you haven't yet met Barry Johnson, Barry is the creator of the Polarity Map, and he's a founding partner of Polarity Partnerships. He's also the author of other books on the topic of polarity, and again, the most recent book that we looked at together, and Making a Difference by Leveraging Polarity, Paradox, or Dilemma. But of course, that's a really brief bio, Barry, and I know that our attendees would probably love to hear more about the story and the context that brought you to this latest book. So could you tell us a little bit about the story and what has brought you
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's actually a very exciting time for me. As I was reflecting on this meeting coming up and the launch of the book, what I was aware of is that there's a 50-year history that is really important about this. So it was actually 50 years ago this year, in 1970, I had been a graduate student at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And in that time, I started an internship program at that first year to understand. I was living in East Harlem in this internship program, understanding what life was like for the urban poor. And I ended up staying in East Harlem for 5 years. And during that time, I got more and more involved in concerns about how organizations, even nation states, were functioning in ways that ended up being cruel to many. And inequitable. And so I was in protests all the time. I was the director of clergy and laity concerned, the office manager of clergy and laity concerned about Vietnam, for example, and was involved in civil rights activities. So I was involved in a lot of protesting during those 5 years in East Harlem. At the end of the 5 years, I was thinking, I don't want to just be protesting systems that work poorly for a lot of people. I need to understand how we get there. So how do nation states find themselves at war? How do we find ourselves with systemic racism? How do we find ourselves in poverty and racism and sexism? And so I decided, I left seminary 50 years ago on a quest. And the quest was, how might we create systems that work better for everyone? And how do we get ourselves into this fix in the first place? And I started with myself. So I decided to look at personal development and then look at group development and work to larger and larger systems, hoping to get back to a point where I could make some contribution that was useful at every level of system. And so in that quest, the first thing I did was I went to the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, and I was in a 2-year training program, and I was working with individuals and couples and with groups. And so I had my start in that. I was also, I founded and directed a residential treatment program for heroin addicts. So I was working with that small community and system. And it was in the end of my 2 years in the Gestalt training that the first Polarity Map occurred in 1975. And it occurred when I was working with an individual client who was stuck. And the Polarity Map actually emerged as I was looking at her effort to make a change in herself. And we discovered something about her own resistance to the change she wanted to make. And we did that by actually moving physically around 2 chairs, which ended up becoming the Polarity Map. And when that session was done, it was very powerful for me and for her. But when the session was done, I thought, actually what just happened here would apply. The principles that sort of emerged in that session, so that would apply to every level of system that I could imagine, right up to international affairs.